After I finally refused to bankroll my spoiled stepsister's expensive drinking habit, exposing years of hidden financial favors and manipulations, a torrent of long-buried family secrets erupted, ruthless accusations flew, and our once united family splintered beyond repair. I've just marked my 21st year. My stepsister, whom I'll refer to as Marie for clarity, is 26. My mother entered into matrimony with Marie's father when I was 7, and he has always been a paternal figure to me. A quick aside, Marie was the quintessential favored child. All she needed to do was convey to our dad her disinclination to perform a task, be it her daily chores or a specific request, and he would promptly redirect it to me or our eldest sister. She was seemingly infallible, thoroughly indulged and coddled by her father. In contrast, I frequently held down 3 or 4 jobs during my teenage years to help sustain our household, as our family was never affluent or even comfortably situated, financially. Now, for the main narrative. I relocated from my family's residence nearly a year ago, accompanied by my then year-long boyfriend. Since then, I've secured employment at a warehouse where both my boyfriend and I now collectively earn approximately $75,000 annually. We've been diligently setting aside funds for a new automobile and potentially a future dwelling. Concurrently, Marie faced eviction from the dwelling we once shared because she illicitly permitted our eldest sister and her offspring to move in without proper authorization from the landlord. She has since been residing on a church-owned property in their community and steadfastly declines to seek employment, asserting, and I quote, "God will take care of me." This is a stark departure from her past. She was never devout, and even used to scoff at religious individuals, but now she has suddenly embraced faith in church, seemingly making it her defining characteristic. This is where the difficulties began. A few days ago, I received a message from Marie inquiring about borrowing some funds, a frequent occurrence since she learned of my respectable income. She doesn't know the precise amount, but is aware it's substantial. I asked her for what purpose, knowing her habit of requesting more than required. She stated, "I want to acquire some Mike's Hard in cans. They're only $5 at present." To which I replied with 3 laughing emojis and then firmly stated, "No." She became irate and questioned why, and I responded, "Because I am not dispatching money to you for the sole purpose of intoxication. If I am transmitting funds, it is because you genuinely require them for something of significance, not to become inebriated." This agitated her further. She proceeded with several paragraphs detailing my supposed insensitivity to her circumstances and how, as her sibling, I ought to assist her. She also included in those paragraphs the assertion that $35 or $40 was inconsequential to me. Candidly, that particular statement infuriated me because, throughout her 26 years, she has never been compelled to exert herself for anything, whereas I was often engaged in 3, sometimes 4 occupations and attending educational institutions to manage the household finances. The sheer audacity of her expecting me to remit $40 and then proclaiming it to be trivial was galling. Initially, I considered ignoring her, as I am aware of my propensity for hurtful and impolite remarks when provoked. However, she persisted in texting me relentlessly, and then she sent a message stating, "I cannot fathom your unwillingness to aid me whatsoever. You never did. All you did was frequent unknown places, and I am utterly weary of your petulant, childish conduct." This ignited my temper. I replied to her, unleashing my sentiments, stating, "You know what? Mom and Dad wished for me not to disclose this to you, fearing it would diminish your regard for them. But it was I who procured your shampoo, conditioner, razors, body wash, and so forth. I am the reason we suddenly had provisions in the refrigerator, when it was barren merely hours prior. I am the reason the automobile underwent repairs so many times. And do you wish to know how? Because I was laboring at 3, sometimes 4, positions to maintain the functioning of our dwelling, all while pursuing my education and participating in all my high school athletic endeavors too. I engaged in softball and volleyball during the first academic term, and tennis and track during the second. So yes, I was perpetually absent or slumbering because I was utterly fatigued daily for years. Furthermore, I am not transmitting these funds to you because divinity does not countenance inebriation. My boyfriend affirms my reaction was justified, asserting she required a moment of realization. My elder sister concurs that she needed to hear it but opines I could have approached it more tactfully. However, Other relatives, including some aunts, uncles, and cousins she has confided in, believe I was excessively severe and could have merely sent her $10 instead of $40. Update 1. Establishing boundaries and family reactions. This afternoon, we convened with a real estate agent and believe we've identified a magnificent residence encompassing all our desired features in a home, along with a splendid yard for future family expansion. In any event, I communicated with my aunts, uncles, and cousins, informing them that if they chose to endorse her being an idler who exploits others, that was their prerogative, but I was no longer willing to be treated as the family's financial resource. I clarified that my teenage efforts did not obligate me to continue this role as an adult with my own life and responsibilities. Most of them relented and offered apologies for their discourtesy and persistence. However, one aunt retorted, "Oh yes, responsibilities, such as what? Bills? We possess 2 felines, a bearded dragon, bills, automobile installments, vehicle insurance, we all do. And you and your companion are prosperous, so it is of little consequence to you both." Another cousin and a few uncles concurred with her, and as a collective, they resolved to incessantly contact me until I yielded. What they did not foresee was my boyfriend assuming control of my phone and continuing the correspondence on my behalf. One characteristic of my boyfriend is his utter intolerance for any slight against me, even of the minutest degree. Thus, upon observing my distress escalating, becoming progressively more agitated, upset, and simply enraged, he had reached his limit. He took my phone and established a group conversation with all the persistently troublesome family members, then dispatched the subsequent message. "All right, hello. Her partner here. She is profoundly distressed, discomposed, and wounded, and that is something I unequivocally do not countenance. Therefore, enough is enough. You individuals were not compelled to undertake even a fraction of what she has endured to ensure her and her family's survival. Incidentally, where were you all when they required sustenance or hygiene commodities, or merely any fundamental necessity? Oh, right, you offered no assistance. She performed a duty she ought not to have had to, but did so because she desired to aid her family's subsistence. She was engaged in 3, occasionally 4, occupations while concurrently pursuing her education and participating in 4 athletic endeavors throughout the academic year. She dedicated the prime of her adolescent years to functioning as a secondary parent and adult. And do you believe she garnered any of that remuneration from those employments? No, she utilized those remittances to procure the essentials they needed. She is now a fully matured individual, generating her own income, and if she chooses not to disperse the earnings she diligently acquires to further indulge the human embodiment of a participation award, she is under no compulsion to do so, and she certainly is not obligated to, nor will she, provide an explanation to anyone regarding her refusal. They offered no rejoinder before my boyfriend precluded their access to my phone, remarking, "You may reinstate their access if you so desire, but I genuinely prefer you do not. They inflict excessive anguish upon you, and I abhor witnessing your distress thus." I concurred it was judicious to sever all communication with the small contingent of relatives who persisted in their badgering and declined to offer recompense, as well as with Marie. My mother was apprised and evinced considerable displeasure, yet affirmed her respect for my decision and vowed to refrain from discussing the family members with whom I had initiated no contact. Update 2. Marie's escalation and consequences. I had, as mentioned in the preceding update, blocked those relatives, aunts, uncles, and cousins, who would not desist alongside my sister Marie, and initiated a period of no contact. Regrettably, this cessation was short-lived. Marie unexpectedly appeared at my residence while my boyfriend was absent. I was engaged in some final outdoor horticultural tasks before our relocation, and thus I did not permit her entry, primarily due to uncertainty regarding her intentions, but also because I had no desire for her presence, let alone inside my home, fearing she might cause damage if provoked, which we would then be liable for. I inquired as to her purpose, and she replied, "Why are you amplifying this to such a degree? I requested between $35 and $40. It is not a substantial sum for you. Goodness, you earn that in perhaps 2 or 3 hours at your profession, and you erupt and block me and the family members striving to impart reason to you?" I regarded her and stated, "This is your predicament, Marie. Father indulged you to such an extent that you are entirely oblivious to the realities of the world. By heavens, you are so engrossed in yourself it's stifling, as you invariably drain the vitality from every space you inhabit. You deem 2 or 3 hours to be a considerable duration? Well, you are correct. That is not a lengthy period, however. It entails a significant amount of exertion within merely 1 hour, and I engage in labor for 10 hours daily and perform supplementary work. I bear financial obligations and responsibilities, matters of which you possess no comprehension. I possess a life and aspirations for it, and functioning as a personal financial dispenser for you is not on my aspirational list. I have fulfilled my equitable contribution to your welfare." Marie responded with a dismissive sound and declared, "You are egocentric, and you are merciless for disregarding your sibling when she requires assistance." Then it was my turn to scoff, and I retorted, "Assistance? Yes, perhaps some sessions for substance abuse and a rehabilitation program, but your desire to become inebriated to forget that you are 26, jobless, residing in a property owned by your religious institution, making no progress in life, merely trapped in the same existence, is not a need for assistance. It is you being an indolent individual who believes a higher power will rectify everything if you merely supplicate sufficiently." My sister became incensed and lunged at me. Initially, I refrained from retaliating, primarily because I wished to avoid a physical altercation with her, but also because I am aware of her lack of combat proficiency, whereas I possess such skills. My mother had me undertake boxing instruction so I could defend myself should I ever find myself in a situation commonly experienced by many females. Instead, my initial efforts were to disengage her from me, but she delivered a blow to my jaw, and I responded in kind. My boyfriend arrived approximately 5 minutes after the altercation commenced and immediately separated my sister from me. He first ascertained my well-being. I sustained a lacerated lip and some minor abrasions and contusions. My sister was bleeding from her nasal cavity and mouth, and contusions were already manifesting. Law enforcement was summoned by a neighbor who witnessed the confrontation. Fortuitously, the surveillance apparatus at our dwelling, positioned to monitor the exterior where we were situated, recorded the entirety of the incident, including my attempts to disengage her without inflicting harm. The police determined my actions constituted self-defense, as I did not strike her until she impacted my jaw, subsequent to her having already struck me 3 times before the blow to my jaw. The definitive decision arose when the officer addressed me and inquired if I desired to file formal accusations against Marie. I glanced at my boyfriend, then at the officer, then at my sister. I recognized the necessity for her to finally confront the repercussions of her conduct, yet concurrently, she was my sibling. At one juncture, I regarded her with the affection due to a sister, and all my adolescent exertions on her behalf flooded my consciousness, all of it undertaken because I wished for our well-being. My boyfriend perceived my indecision and drew me aside, inquiring what restrained me. I conveyed to him my understanding that she required to confront her repercussions, but it was arduous to assent to charges against my sister and consign her to incarceration. My boyfriend affirmed her status as my sibling but emphasized the impropriety of her actions and the necessity for her to face them. We engaged in a back-and-forth exchange, with me overthinking and him providing reassurance. Once composed, I returned to the officer and with an unswerving countenance articulated, "I wish to file charges. It is high time she apprehended that her actions bear consequences." The officer indicated that a lengthy sentence was improbable if any custodial time were even imposed, but she would, at the very least, be subjected to a period of probation for several years and a substantial number of community service hours. However, for me, it was not about the duration of incarceration. It was about finally compelling my sister to account for her deeds. She indeed spent 2 weeks in confinement awaiting her judicial hearing, and subsequently received probation and community service hours, precisely as the law enforcement official had predicted. None of the family members who had importuned me to provide her with funds have been able to establish contact with me, as they are unable, and I am indifferent to their displeasure. As I previously stated, my boyfriend and I did acquire the residence we discussed with the real estate agent, and we have relocated and begun settling in. We are enamored with this dwelling. It perfectly aligns with our desires, and we are exceedingly content. We have resolved to postpone the expansion of our family for a while to simply savor our new abode together, a decision I honestly did not object to in the slightest. We have dedicated considerable time to procuring furnishings for our outdoor space, adorning our home, and imprinting our personal touch upon it. We have welcomed 2 sibling pit bull puppies, Calypso and Rocky, into our family, who also adore our enclosed backyard and delight in cuddling in our laps or pursuing our companions around the evening fire pit in the backyard. I no longer perceive the oppressive burden of Marie and all the associated turmoil, and most advantageously, neither my sister nor the estranged family members are cognizant of this new dwelling. Oh, they are utterly charming. Our felines also coexist harmoniously with them, which had been a concern of ours. I finally feel as though my life has regained its equilibrium. Second narrative, child abduction and trauma. Now, for the subsequent account. My sister's male companion abducted my offspring during a relational dispute, imperiling their existence while I contended powerlessly with ire and alleviation. My sister's male companion was apprehended and incarcerated, presently detained with a bail amount his kin cannot meet. I am psychologically scarred as a parent. The second direst occurrence imaginable transpired, the initial being demise. I was unaware of his whereabouts for 6 minutes, yet it felt akin to 30, and I sense I was the final individual contacted regarding the unfolding events. I am incensed. I am incensed at my sister's male companion. I am incensed at my sister, and I am incensed at myself. I acknowledge I ought not to be, yet I am. To encapsulate the narrative, my sister was slated to care for my son a couple of evenings ago. She communicated her inability to conclude her work responsibilities promptly, but suggested her companion could supervise him for 30 minutes to an hour before her return. I deemed this acceptable as it was a brief interval. I was profoundly mistaken. A premonition of unease enveloped me upon my arrival to drop him off. I disregarded it, attributing it to anxiety and self-centeredness, desiring merely an evening of leisure. I received a telephone call approximately 45 minutes after his drop-off. My sister's male companion had just arrived at her workplace, assaulted her, wrecked her vehicle, and departed with my child inside the aforementioned damaged automobile. My apologies, I returned the call, and she informed me they had located him, but I could not yet see him, and I instantly assumed he was deceased. Those were the most harrowing 6 minutes of my existence. Essentially, my sister endeavored to terminate her relationship with him that morning. But in his perception, she was not authorized to dissolve their connection, and that instigated the entirety of this ordeal. I surmise he initially employed their canine as a bargaining chip, prompting my sister to enlist our other sister's assistance in extricating her dog from that predicament. She stated her intention to instruct me not to drop off my child, but that he was exhibiting normal behavior, and had calmed down, so she refrained. However, I earnestly wish she had, and I am incensed that she did not. I would never have left him there. He arrived at her workplace, threatened to harm my child if she did not emerge, accelerated into an adjacent alleyway, and throttled her, asking, "Do you truly desire to sever our connection? I merely wish for you to comprehend that if you do, my child and I will embark on a journey." She responded negatively, and he accused her of deceit and collided with her workplace signage, rendering her vehicle a total loss. He then informed her that if she attempted to flee or cry for assistance, he would extinguish my child's life. He struck her again, further disputation ensued, and he began to accelerate, attempting to abduct her, but she leapt from the vehicle and fled screaming into her workplace. Law enforcement discovered my child alone in their apartment, the door secured. He had deposited him there and absconded on foot. He surrendered himself after approximately an hour of concealment, weeping and confessing everything. My child is unharmed and unaware of the events, believing they were engaging in play, but I am not well. My sister is also unwell. She has been burdened with a substantial financial strain as they resided together, and is without an automobile and is traumatized. I feel profoundly remorseful for my anger towards her. I acknowledge I would be at a loss in such a circumstance, having never experienced it, and she was in a state of primal survival, yet I am enraged, rational or not. I am enraged she did not apprise me of their relational difficulties. I am enraged she leapt from the vehicle screaming after he threatened my child's life. I am enraged I was not immediately informed. Yet, I also feel guilt. I have perpetually served as my sister's protector, and I harbored no concern for her during this unfolding crisis. My sole preoccupation was my child. I feel greater indignation that my child was implicated than about what transpired with her, and that is deplorable. I fail to comprehend the origin of these sentiments or how to address them. My family evades discussion of the matter. There is much more I could articulate, but ultimately I am immeasurably grateful that my child is well. I prayed with fervent devotion. I am grateful my sister is physically sound, sustaining only minor contusions, and I am grateful he is incarcerated, merely hoping for a substantial punitive measure. Editorial note: clarifications and lingering emotions. It appears there may be some ambiguity. The incident involving the canine as a hostage occurred, I believe, around 1 or 2 p.m., while I left my son at 7:45 p.m. This is not to imply poor judgment on my part, but there was a significant time gap between these occurrences. Nevertheless, I do not intend to censure my sister or press charges against her. That was not the objective of this post. She was as astonished by this as I was. She was not shielding her abusive partner. She experienced a temporary lapse in discretion. She immediately rushed into her workplace, screaming for the police, and assisted in his apprehension. I will certainly exercise greater prudence moving forward, but I respectfully request a cessation of overly severe comments regarding my sister. She did not intend for this to transpire. You all have, however, helped me feel justified in my indignation, and I truly appreciate that. Perhaps it is because she is my sister and possesses an inherently good nature, but you are correct. Her canine is her cherished companion. She unequivocally prioritizes him over her nephew, and if he had been in the vehicle, I do not believe she would have exited. However, I shall have to contemplate this for a period. I neglected to mention, but he ingested a Xanax, I presume, immediately after I departed, so he was also under the influence. He lacks a driver's license, and furthermore, he had been planning this entire ordeal. I believe that is the most chilling aspect of all. He gazed into my eyes and stated, "Your child has a secure place to stay tonight," before I departed, and he appeared so composed and ordinary. I never anticipated this unfolding. First update. The aftermath of the abduction. This update transpired in May. He ultimately received only 6 years of probationary supervision. Just prior to my sister's scheduled testimony, they informed her that he had accepted a plea agreement. She was released from the case and could no longer receive updates as it was no longer her active case. His mother then dispatched a highly antagonistic, abuse-condoning, victim-blaming communication to me on October 8th. He passed away on November 22nd, either due to an overdose or self-inflicted harm, or a combination thereof. I am not entirely certain. It's not much of an update. I'm genuinely unsure how to feel. I'm relieved he can no longer inflict harm upon anyone else, yet I lament that he did not receive a just sentence and found an expedient escape. It has been a peculiar month. Editorial addendum, further particulars and sibling relationship. I realized I omitted certain details. He ultimately secured his release on bail, as his family apparently did possess the financial means, approximately 2 weeks subsequent to these events. My sister concluded her workday and discovered him asleep in her vehicle. She enlisted a colleague to transport her home, and the following morning he materialized at her residence, prompting her to summon law enforcement. He was apprehended without bail this time. He ultimately secured the services of a competent legal representative, and the remainder is history. My sister and I have not maintained communication since June, with the exception of occasional Sundays when we convene with the family and exchange a few words. Following his demise, we have since removed blockades to communication and maintain limited contact. Hopefully, we can progress and cultivate our relationship. Commenter perspectives and my reflections. Commenter. This is a monumental development. One less male aggressor, child abductor, and deranged individual in this world. My response. Honestly, my initial reaction to the news was, may he endure eternal suffering, and that sentiment persists. Yet I still wish the judicial authority had shared that perspective, if that conveys my meaning. Commenter. It is indeed comprehensible. He was granted leniency with a plea agreement and permitted to remain a threat to your sister. That is unjust. I deeply resent when judicial figures afford such men light sentences, as if they will miraculously transform into normal human beings and cease tormenting their victims. Once they escalate, they never de-escalate. My response? Yes, she departed the court proceedings and vacated her dwelling on that very day. They had cohabited. He financially and emotionally devastated her, and his former partner communicated with my sister after he had messaged her through the jail application and attempted to fabricate falsehoods, displaying screenshots and images of his conduct and the contusions he inflicted upon her. She was not the inaugural female he had subjected to such treatment. I am fortunate my sister was the final recipient of his aggression, I sincerely hope. Commenter. I am not entirely convinced that demise can be characterized as an effortless escape, as it represents the ultimate and final retribution. One hopes he experienced suffering during his final moments, but frankly, he deserves no sympathy. How are you faring? How is your son coping with all of this? My response. My son is quite young and does not fully grasp the ramifications of what transpired or the concept of mortality, but for me, as I mentioned, it has been an unusual month. The week these events unfolded, I had finally severed all ties with my son's neglectful father. I had just lost my employment, received some unfortunate news, and learned of his passing, all within the same week, making it a significant burden. I do consider it a favorable outcome, given he was only granted probation rather than incarceration, and could potentially harm another female or family. My sister and I have been on unfavorable terms since then, and we have only recently reconnected, after his death, and can hopefully cultivate our relationship. I believe it may finally be opportune to pursue therapeutic intervention, however. Commenter. Why were you and your sister on unfavorable terms stemming from this? This doesn't seem to be her culpability, which is why I inquire if you are amenable to sharing, of course. I cannot fathom your emotional state. I regret that all of this must feel dreadful. My response. Simply the sequence of events. Her failure to inform me of her intention to dissolve their relationship that day, and that he had been holding their canine captive merely hours prior to the incident. I had planned for my parents to supervise him, but then she offered, and she rarely did so. Thus I believed it would be beneficial for them to forge a bond, only for all of that to transpire. I was willing to navigate through it, but then during the legal proceedings, she withheld all information, despite my persistent inquiries, and seemed to merely desire detachment from the situation, engaging in excessive consumption of alcohol and attempting to move past it. I comprehend that, but she centered everything on her own distress and acted as though I was not also traumatized, and that simply exasperated and vexed me. That, coupled with a past unresolved matter that resurfaced, propelled it into complete non-communication. Commenter. The mother transmitted a hostile message to you. Why you and not the sister? This lacks logical coherence. You were not romantically involved with him. My response. Oh, believe me, she dispatched one to my sister as well. I had publicized the situation on social media platforms when it initially occurred, and I surmise she did not become aware of it until she had messaged me. But she was essentially conveying sentiments akin to, her actions led to this predicament. Report me to the authorities if you're upset about it, along with a plethora of victim-blaming absurdities. She asserted that my sister's act of spitting in his countenance in retaliation to his attempt to strike her, incidentally, constituted abuse, and he subsequently physically assaulted her for it, yet she refrained from mentioning that particular detail, or rather, he misrepresented it.